Did you know you can rewrite your story? It's true. I've done it 100 times. I'm Kath Telford. I am a mum to 2 grown men. I'm a spirituality life coach and intuitive, and I also teach radical forgiveness. In my life, I've experienced trauma, loss, and insurmountable grief at times. I've worked through an eating disorder, sexual assault, and physical and mental abuse. But I'm still standing, and I'm happier and stronger than ever. My mission with this podcast is to create a community, a safe space where you can feel seen, heard, and above all else, loved. At the end of each episode, I will ask you a question and offer you a call to action. I will also tell you how you can get involved and share your stories. You'll be invited to ask me questions and make suggestions on what you want to hear. I will be having some incredible guests along the way, some amazing human beings that have overcome diversity in their life. They will share with you their stories and how they got to where they are now. We will cover everything from birth to death and the big dash in between, and all things spiritual and woo-woo, my favourite topic. This ride may get rough at times, so buckle up and let's go. Hello, my darlings. It's me again, Kath Telford, with another episode of You Can Rewrite Your Story. What a week it's been. I recorded last week about what's been happening for me in the last couple of months and the emotional roller coaster that I've been on. And just as always, the universe just keeps giving me more stuff to deal with. So since the last episode, I have had some more stuff come up from my past and some more memories that I had sort of buried away. And I really felt that I wanted to come on and share some of this with you. So I've talked before about, our belief systems and how things that happen to us in our lives help to mold the people that we become and to form the belief system around our initial thought patterns, for want of a better word. I know I'm always struggling to find the right words with these things, but they just end up seeming to come out of my mouth. So this is a trigger warning. First and foremost, if you've got young people with you or kids around, I am going to be discussing some trauma from my teenage years to do with sexual abuse and yeah, that's what I'm discussing. So trigger warning, anybody listening that shouldn't be listening or anyone that feels that they're not ready to hear what I'm going to share, maybe turn off now and come back at another time when you're in a better headspace. So I'm going to start back when I was younger. Now, when I talk about the sexual trauma in my life, I will preface it with that it was never within my family. There was no childhood sexual abuse, nothing like that. Mine was more, it happened in my teens, and it usually occurred with people outside of my family. Well, it always occurred, people outside of my family. But I'll take you back to the mindset of me before the first few events happened in my teenage years, and where I was emotionally, mentally, and physically is relevant too for this one. I have told you before about being adopted and the hole that created in my soul is the only way I can put it. The hole that put in my ability to feel worthy
was quite massive. And up until probably grade 5 at primary school, maybe grade 4 at primary school, I thought life was amazing. Like, I had incredible parents. I had a great family. We were all close. We all went on holidays. We all hung out together. Um, but going into grade 5, I started to be really badly bullied at school by the boys in the grade above me, mostly boys. There were a couple of girls within my year level that decided to join in on that as well at some point. But it was mostly the boys, the older boys, and for reasons that escaped me, I couldn't fathom why all of a sudden this started to happen. They would, I'd walk through the school courtyard and they would piff their Sunny Boys at me. Now, if any of you are as old as me, you'll remember what Sunny Boys were. They were like a frozen ice treat that you got in like a little triangular kind of package. Anyway, they were all the rage when we were kids. And, these hideous boys would sit along walls in the courtyard and piff these things at me as hard as they could as I walked through. Now, I was a particularly scrawny young girl, and so my features were quite prominent. Like, I had a bigger nose and I had massive lips, which, yay to me, people have to pay for now. I don't, thankfully. But these were the things that they identified on me, that they took great pleasure in attacking me for. That, and the fact that my mum was very involved in the local school, in our school and in the church. I had an auntie that worked in the office at the school. So I don't know what was going on in these kids, but for some reason I was their target. And I would be subjected to being surrounded by these boys, pushing me back and forwards in the circle, calling me names, teacher's pet, all sorts of horrible things. And my my little brother, who was at the same school, we were constantly pulling each other out of situations. He was a fiery little thing and quite often got himself into scraps with other boys, and I'd be called by someone else in the playgrounds, to say that my brother was in the middle of, oh, he's in a fight with so-and-so. So I'd go racing over and pull him out of the fight, and he'd hear about these boys surrounding me. Someone would go running to him, goes, John, someone's got your sister. And he'd come powering in and, punch all these boys and get them off me and, walk away with me like the little hero that he was. And has always been. He's always had that nature. So moving into that, so that was grade 5. I would have been 10, I think, 10. Going into grade 6, those boys had kind of all left school and moved on to high school. Then in grade 6, it started with a couple of girls that would do horrible things to me, hold my head down toilets and just follow me around, saying horrible things to me and pushing me around, and they'd follow me into the toilet block and hold the door shut. And it was really traumatic. And I could never tell anybody. And I chose not to tell anybody, but I used to believe that it was me. It was my fault. So I didn't tell people what was happening. And the boys in our grade level, there was a handful that were a bit the same, that would target me and, brace up to me. One of their favourite things was running up and kicking me and punching me, winding me. And I can remember having the conversation with one of them years later when we'd sort of grown up a bit. I said, what was that all about? Like, why were you guys so horrible to me? And he said, we used to have bets on, because you were so thin. So my nicknames, here was my nicknames: Boney Maroney, Mount Kosciuszko because of my nose, Luba lips, um, you know, all these kind of names picking on how I looked more than anything. And he said they used to put bets on who could snap me, snap me in two because I was so thin. I've got to go up and kick her and see if she'll break, kind of thing, or go up and punch her as hard as you can. Um, and so that was my last 2 years at primary school. So I had little to no self-esteem left by the time I left primary school. And going into the school holidays at that point, something magical happened where I developed and, grew boobs and seemed to grow into my features. And suddenly boys were paying attention to me. And I was a bit befuddled by this because, by that stage, I was one of the boys in a sense, not that group of boys, but like all my friends were boys. We used to ride our bikes around the streets and go to each other's houses. There was a couple of girls in there too, but it used to quite often astound me that no boys ever seemed to hit on me if you're 12 years old. Because, you're all about who you first kisses with and all that kind of thing, young teenage stuff, not even teenagers yet. But it was all the rave to have a boyfriend and, I'm going around. We used to say going around. So I'm going around with, Philip or whatever, whoever it was. And then 2 days later, it's like, oh, I dropped him because he likes so-and-so. And like, it was kids stuff. It was huge, just kids being kids. But there was some damage done to my self-esteem, a lot of damage done to my self-esteem. I had a real phobia about how I looked. I had a phobia about my weight. I didn't seem to be able to put on weight. I was just thin and I was tall, and God, I wish that's what I look like now. Oh my God, I can laugh now. But so what it did for me was once I sort of developed over that summer and started high school, boys started paying attention to me. And I was like, this is weird. I don't understand this. This is kind of weird, kind of strange. And about a year into high school, my parents had gone overseas for a trip, and I had been shipped off to stay with some family friends. Shipped off. Anyway, I'd been sent to stay with some family friends, as all of the younger kids were, because there was the 3 younger ones and the 4 older ones. But the 3 younger ones were quite often we'd go stay with cousins or friends of mum and dad's or whatever for however long they were away. And the family that I'd been sent to stay with, who were very close friends of mum and dad's, had 3 daughters and a little boy. So, yep, that's great. No worries. And their father was very involved in the local church too, and in the youth side of things. And we had a movie night that was going to happen at the church hall, movie night. And I had been asked by, oddly enough, one of the boys that was a year older than me, who was in that original pack of kids when I was grade 5. So he would have been maybe 15 by this stage, and I was 13, I think. He had asked if it would be all right if I sat with him at the pictures. And I was like, this is a bit exciting. So I've been asked by a boy to sit next to him at the pictures. And so I went to the father of the family that I was staying with, and I said, would it be okay? Is that all right? And he was like, well, yeah, because I'm going to be there and I'm going to be supervising, and, there's nothing untoward that can go on. So, everyone was in agreement that I could sit with this boy. Anyway, the night progressed and I'd worn my favourite brand new dress, which was a khaki like pinafore. I remember it as clear as a bell. And I had like a little cream coloured chiffon blouse under it, I think it was, and treads. Now, back in the 70s, we wore things called treads, and some of you will remember them. They were the fuggliest things you've ever seen, but they were the trendiest things at the time. So I know exactly what I was wearing, clear as a bell. And we get to the pictures and, well, to the school hall, and the chairs are all lined up like they are in school halls for these things. And the movie starts. And next thing I know, this boy's holding my hand. And I thought, oh, this is a bit special. Look at me, a bit special. And then the hand started to venture up my skirt. And I was like trying to push it away. And I was saying, no, this isn't what I want. And he was being all sweet and sucky woo-woo like boys can be. And he just let me touch the top of your leg. And anyway, it didn't stop at the top of my leg. And I kind of froze on the spot because I was mortified. What if someone's watching? What if someone sees what's going on? So I froze in my body, just froze. Unbeknownst to me at the time, this boy had already lined it up with his mates. They all sat very close proximity to us, and his hand was not the only one that was making its way up my dress and inside my knickers. And by this stage, I felt like a deer in the headlights. My whole body seemed to shut down and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't get anyone's attention. I literally just sat there and I felt like I'd left my body. Now, I wouldn't have known what that meant as a girl that age. I didn't know what that was going on. But over the years, when similar things have happened to me and I've had that same reaction, it kind of it made sense with what was going on. And following the picture ending and this moment being over, I don't even know how long the moment went for, and I know that there was quite a few hands handling me at that time. I couldn't tell you who. I don't know how many. It was very daunting. We left the school hall and got out to the car, and the father of the family had to tidy up a few more things inside before he came out. So I was in the car with two of his daughters, because one was my age and one was a couple of years older. And I said to the eldest daughter, oh, this just happened inside. And she looked at me horrified, absolutely horrified. She goes, Kathy, you can't do that. And I was, what? I didn't do anything. The next morning, I was in my room, waking up for school, and the father knocked on the door and came in. And he's like, how are you going? Did you enjoy a night last night? Da, 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 da. And he more or less said to me, and I know as an adult it was coming from a good space, but as a little girl, and I was a little girl, I was still barely a teenager, and young at that. I wasn't a kid of the world. I didn't, I'd grown up fairly much, not secluded from the world, but I grew up in a family that, we were always all together. And I didn't know much about the big wide world. I knew it could be cruel because I'd been subjected to it on several occasions. Anyway, back to he said to me that the daughter had told him what happened last night. And he said, you don't have to do things like that for boys to like you. And I was speechless because in my mind, I hadn't done anything. But following that conversation, I believed it was all my fault. And I never, ever trusted anyone again to tell them when something like this might happen or did happen. I just, in that moment, decided I will never trust anyone again with something that's um, so personal and so hard to grasp. So I walked away believing it was my fault. I walked away thinking that I'd done something wrong, and this is why these boys thought that it was all okay to do what they were doing. Um, Fast forward uh, a year or so, my somebody in our extended family who was well and truly 4 to 5 years older than me, a similar thing occurred, but it didn't occur once, it occurred several times. And I would have that same response. I would just freeze. And, there was a part of me that wanted to believe that what was happening with this person was my fault. But there was also a part of me being, a teenage girl. I think I was 14, or I would have been 14, that I thought was a bit groovy that this older guy was interested in me in that way. There was never any sex involved. It was always, groping and touching, and but I had the same physical response to that, and but dismissed it in my mind once again because there was a part of me that was like, oh wow, this is a bit fun. This is a bit cool that this older man is taking this interest in me. But I was never allowed to tell anybody. It was always, this is our secret, and you can never tell anybody, and um, but you're my girlfriend, but just don't tell anybody. So there was all of that kind of thing going on. And this went on for probably a good couple of years. Um, and then when I was in my late 15, so 15 turning 16, I had started to date a boy. So because I'd started to date a boy, this other person, I think this other person must have had a girlfriend by then. And she was allowed to be known about. I was never allowed to be known about, but he had a girlfriend by then. So he'd sort of had disappeared a bit off the scene. And 15 turning 16, I'd left school and I was hanging around with a girlfriend, and she was dating this boy, and his best friend had decided that, he liked me and I liked him. And once again, we never actually even got past kissing. I think we probably kissed 2 or 3 times, but there was an occasion where he had invited me over one night, and my mum had driven me to this house, and she had not such good vibes about the place when she dropped me off, but because she believed my girlfriend was going to be there and that there was a mother in the house, and there was a mother in the house, the mother of this boy that I liked, she kind of thought that it was going to be okay, that I'd be safe. And I never told her any different. And what ended up happening that night was I arrived at this boy's house, and he had gone out with his ex-girlfriend. And I was shattered. I was heartbroken. It was 14 or 15 I was. 15-year-old girls are when the boy that they think's, the love of their life, cheats on them in inverted commas. He'd gone out with this girl, and left at the house was his mother, his younger sister, and a couple of her friends, 14-year-old kids. We were all kids. And I didn't have the wherewithal to call my mum back at the time. It was way before mobile phones. There was only a house phone. And in fact, I don't think they even had a house phone. They weren't a particularly well-to-do family. I don't think there was even a house phone. From memory, the boy used to use the phone box up the road to call me. Anyway, they were drinking alcohol and the mother was in the house and the mother wasn't poo-pooing it and wasn't not encouraging it. And she just had basically said to us, well, you can have a drink as long as you all stay in that room. And I'd never had alcohol before. I'd never touched alcohol. I was terrified to touch alcohol because I was, not that I was terrified of my father, but I respected my parents too much. And I probably was a little bit scared that if I did do the wrong thing, I didn't know what would ever happen. And that probably came from a fear of having been adopted. I think in the back of my mind, I was always worried that if I fucked up, I might be given back. Stupid, unreasonable belief. But I realised years later that that's where it was. It was, oh, I can't do the wrong thing because they'll give me back or they won't love me anymore or, the things we believe. Anyway, I had a couple of drinks and I don't even know what I was drinking, but this boy was mixing the drinks and I don't remember anything past a certain point. I remember sitting there at some point and we were listening to some music. And the next thing I remember is opening my eyes and this boy was on top of me and he was how do I say? He was assaulting me with a liquor bottle. It's the only way I can say it. And I woke up and I was looking at him like I didn't know what was going on. My mind was all over the show. I was, obviously alcohol affected, but felt like there was something else going on because I didn't know what drunk felt like. And it wasn't nice. I didn't like it particularly at all. But I can remember the door opening and the mother coming into the bedroom and she looked over and saw what was going on and there was other people in the room. And she looked over and saw what was going on and basically shook her head and walked back out and shut the door and left me. So I don't remember much else after that. I don't even remember my mum picking me up. I don't remember getting home. But what I do remember is the next day, several of these boys calling my home number and saying horrendous things to me on the phone, calling me all kinds of disgusting names. And so once again, I walked away from that situation believing that it was my fault. And there'll be people out there that will probably say, well, you put yourself in that situation. And I know there's people out there that say stuff like that, but you don't. I was a really trusting kid. I had no reason not to trust people that were my friends, I thought were my friends. I had, as I said, learnt not to trust another adult with something. Quite so personal. Wow. So this is bringing up some things. Anyway, it's funny when I do these stories that as I think back to the moments, there's more stuff that comes up, which, as I always say, I'll come back to another time. And that's how all of that happened. Fast forward a few months, I met a boy, an older boy, who I fell head over heels in love with. He was the love of my life. This was the man I was going to marry. I'd grown up all my life watching, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies. I was an old musical buff, so I loved all the old time movies, and I always believed, my mum and dad's love story had been this way. They'd met each other and they'd fallen in love and adopted 7 kids, and not that adoption was the way I thought it was going to go. But the thing, like I had this vision that my life was going to go a certain way and I was going to be this person that, met the man of her dreams at 16, like my mother did, and get married and have a million kids and live happily ever after as a housewife. My God, that is not what happened at all. So by the time I met this boy that I fell head over heels in love with, um, and decided he was going to be the one, because he was going to marry me. I knew he was going to marry me. He'd never said that, but that was my belief system. I was going to marry this boy, and that's the one I'm going to give myself away to. But by this stage, I already felt quite damaged as a human being. I already felt like I wasn't a worthy person to have someone care about me. And, I think we dated for 3 or 4 months, but I thought this was the man I was going to have babies with. And when he dumped me, I was shattered, shattered. Thought my world had come to a complete end. And the next main relationship that I dated a couple of other boys along the way, but the next main relationship I had, I was 17 and I was with this guy for nearly 2 years. And he was a few years older than me. And, came from a big family. I came from a big family. He was exciting. He was charismatic. He was naughty. And he was popular. He seemed popular. Everyone seemed to really like him because he was a little bit out there. And I was like, well, I kind of like him too because he's a bit exciting and he's a bit of fun. And so we proceeded to date for a couple of years. And I had no self-esteem left by this stage, absolutely none. I hadn't had self-esteem left for a long time. And I felt quite used up and quite broken as a person. And I had never been able to communicate that to anybody. So this was just something I carried around like a dirty cloth in my bag. It was just, oh God, I can't tell anyone how revolting I really am. I can't tell anyone how broken I really am. So I'm just going to play the game and look like my life's amazing. And I quickly discovered that this man wasn't everything he'd appeared to be. He was cruel. He was abusive. He was something definitely wrong with his brain, the way he behaved. He wasn't exciting. He was dangerous. He constantly reminded me that I was a fat, ugly whore that nobody would ever want to be with. And of course, the more he told me that I was a fat, ugly whore, the more weight I started putting on. I probably should have met him when I was 11 because I couldn't gain weight then. If I'd met him earlier, I might have been able to start getting fat then. But he constantly told me that no one would ever want you. You're disgusting. You're a fat, ugly whore. He would physically hurt me in places where nobody would ever see the bruising or the damage. He would twist my skin. He would pinch me. He would punch me in my hips. In places that nobody would ever see. And he was nasty. He was a nasty son of a bitch. And I think I stayed as long as I did because I really believed what he was telling me. I was really believing by now that I was broken and I was disgusting and nobody would ever want me. And I loved his family. I have to say I loved his family and I loved the idea of having a big family. I loved the idea of being part of a big family. And I had that with him. I felt I had that with him. And, you know, he was one of the group of friends that I hung out with. And yeah, broke me. He broke me. And I finally left him. I did break up with him at one point, and I think we were broken up for about 3 months. But he did things like rang my house nonstop, rang my parents nonstop. At one stage, there were two, this is going to sound insane, but this is what it was. There was like 2 or 3 carloads of interflora flowers that turned up at my parents' house. And there was one bunch for each member of my family. And as I said, I came from a big family. So it was a bunch for each member of my family. There was several bunches for me. There were ornaments. There were notes to my parents. There was flowers for my parents. It was insane. And I got home from work that night and Mum sort of said, "Oh, Catherine, you've got to come and have a look at this." And I walked into her front lounge room and it looked like someone had died. Seriously looked like someone had died. And it was bizarre, but it was also a little part of me went, "Oh my God, he does love me. He really does love me." And I took him back. And I took him back. And I think I stayed probably another 12 months before we were out at a dinner party one night with his parents. And in that 12 months, he had on many occasions forced me to do things with him sexually that I would never have contemplated, and would just force me to have sex whenever he wanted to have sex. And in places where I would, you know, I was kind of prudish. It was probably not what the outside world saw because I put on this bravado that I was this confident, bubbly human being, but I was kind of prudish, and I didn't want to displease him because of what the ramifications could have been. But I walked out of his parents' place in tears one night after a horrendous thing that happened, and I didn't know if I was ever going to go back there. But when I did go back and try to explain to his mum what had happened, because she was like, you know, you left so suddenly, and she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear that her son could have done something so horrific. So once again, I shut down and didn't share any more of what was going on there. And I didn't let any of my friends know what was going on. I think a couple of them suspected something weird was happening because we'd been at a 21st one night and I was talking to a friend on the other side of the room, and a glass of beer was hurled across the room by my boyfriend that hit this bloke in the chest that I was talking to. And this bloke was like a big brother to me. You know, there was never like, he was the biggest cuddly teddy bear you could ever meet. I was never going to be interested in him, but this jealousy came out, and my boyfriend walked over and reached across the trestle table and grabbed me by the hair and pulled me to his face and said, "If you ever speak to anybody else at a party again without me by your side, that's it. We're done." And one of my girlfriends turned around and said, and he left. So my boyfriend stormed out, waiting for me to run after him. And my girlfriend turned around and said, "If you go after him, we're done." I went after him because I was terrified. I believed by this point that I would never find anybody else. I believed at this point that I wasn't worthy of anybody else. And fast forward a few more months, and we were at a dinner party with his parents at a friend of theirs' home. And I spoke out of turn. I can't even remember what I said, but apparently it wasn't in line with what he wanted me to say. And he stood up and backhanded me across the face and stormed out of this dinner party. And all the men at the table, and there was adult men there, you know, he wasn't the only male at the table. There was his father was there, his father's brother was there, or his father's cousin or somebody. Anyway, it was family and relatives at this dinner party. And they all jumped up, mortified that he just smacked me across the face, backhanded me, almost fist-like. And he stormed out and got a taxi home. And then the dinner party obviously broke up after that. It was a little bit too eventful for everybody. And his mother said to me, and leading up to this, we had talked about getting married. Now, at this stage, I was probably only 19. And I believe this was as good as it gets because, you know, nice people didn't want me. The boy of my dreams didn't want me. So this must be it for me. And his mother stood up and she said to me, if you marry him, we will not come to your wedding. His own mother. And we all left and I went home with his parents and pulled up at his house as he was getting out of the taxi. Heaven knows where he'd gone in between time because we were a good half an hour behind him. And they made sure I got to my car and they made sure I got out of there really quickly. His father kept him distracted while I got in my car and drove away. And the next 3 years, he stalked me. He would turn up at my work. He would turn up when I'd be out with friends. He would be watching me. I was getting a lift home from the pub one night with a friend who we stopped at the servo to get some fuel. And next thing he appeared at the car window and was threatening me and threatening this guy. And I moved out of home. And I think in that 3 years, I moved about 5 times because he kept finding me. You know, I was at the market one time in South Melbourne with my girlfriend who was very, very pregnant. And I could feel like someone was following me. And it sounded really weird. And I'm saying to my girlfriend, I've got this really bad vibe. Someone's watching me. And she was like, are you sure what's going on? And he appeared. Next thing he appeared in front of us. So this was, it would have been 3 years later, 2 years later. And then my little brother informs me that had been going on for quite some time as far as mum and dad were concerned too. He'd leave notes on their cars, on my brother's car. He'd be ringing the house at all kinds of hours at night. When I spoke to my mum about it, and the reason my brother had finally told me is because my mum had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and he thought that it was time that I knew what had been happening because mum and dad had kept it from me for my own safety and my own sense of peace, I suppose. So that was that. So that's part of my story as far as the sexual trauma in my life, for starters, the abuse, the lack of self-worth. There's more to come. There's more to come. And I won't be doing it this episode, but it will come. So I'm going to finish today's episode on that note, but I just want anyone who's listening that has ever been through something like this or has ever experienced watching a loved one go through something like this, you can get to the other side. There is another side, and you reach out to somebody. Reach out to me. Hell, send me a text, send me a DM, drop me an email, comment on this video, anything. But don't go through something like this on your own, and don't believe for a second that you're not a worthy human being because things were done to you. And there'll be naysayers that listen to this episode who have, who may or may not have known me growing up. Don't believe for a second there wasn't a moment in time that I took back my sexual power and decided, well, I'm going to hurt them before they hurt me. But that was after several more years of abusive relationships before I ever got that, before I got that strong. And it wasn't coming from strength. It was coming from sheer survival mode. And I would leave before the damage was done. If I saw an inkling of something that wasn't right, I was gone. And then years later fell back into it again. Another chapter that I will share down the track. But back to you listening, anybody who has been through this, anyone who has been the victim of any form of sexual abuse, sexual trauma, I can only, as I say, every episode when I share my stories, I can only share from my perspective. I can't tell you how you have to deal with it. I can't tell you how to get over it. All I can do is show you by example where I've gotten to and tell you how I got over it. And it's taken a lot of years, and it's taken, the last 6 months of a lot of this stuff that I've suppressed to start coming up. But I figure going forward, I can't be my true, authentic self as long as I'm holding on to things that have damaged me so badly in the past. And I can't pretend they didn't happen. And I choose to share these stories because through my sharing the story, I'm helping myself heal from it all. And I'll be fucked if I'm paying a therapist $300 or $400 a session to repeat the trauma over and over and over and over and over again, and just re-traumatize myself and walk out of the office after an hour and say, see you next week. Not going to happen. This is my choice to speak about these things. This is my forum to share my story in the hope that there is somebody out there listening that can resonate with my story, who by hearing me speak about what I went through can help them somehow find some peace, or at least find the light that they can reach out to. And as I said, if it's me or it's somebody else, it's not going to go away. That pain does not go away until you start to face it and talk about it. And don't pay some stupid fucking, don't get me wrong, therapists have a place and they are very helpful and amazing. And I have done my share of therapy. I've done a big share of therapy, probably 10 years of it. But I found, for me at least, it did not work because I was constantly re-traumatizing myself by telling these stories. And you know what? I'm going to be brutally honest. I probably never told the therapists half of what I've said today in this episode, because there was that part of me that still believed that I was dirty and unworthy and broken and disgusting. And why would I tell somebody that? Why would I pay someone to tell someone how disgusting I was? I would tell them about whatever was going on in my life at that moment, or, I'd bring up something that had happened in the past, but I never before now have told that story from the school hall to anybody, apart from the girl that I mentioned it to, who went straight to her father, who, bless his soul, I know was trying to say the right thing at the time. He wanted to raise lovely girls. But it backfired with me because I'd already been so damaged with the horrible abuse that I'd copped, well, the bullying that I'd copped at school and outside of school, but mostly at school. So anyway, that's it. I can't say any more. I'll go on forever if I do, but I just, if this has happened to you, if you've been through a situation where you've been with a controlling partner or you've been, abused in some way, shape, or form, physically, sexually, mentally, emotionally, talk to someone, reach out to someone. If it's not me, tell your best friend. You've never, ever done anything that is so bad that you can't share it with someone. And you know what? If you share your story with someone and they discard you as some kind of damaged goods or stuff, fuck them. I say fuck them, because there will be people out there that want to hear, and there will be people out there that will want to wrap their arms around you and pick you up and hold you upright. As I found with my amazing circle of friends that I have, there are people out there that will love you unconditionally and who will pull you through whatever you've got to go through. So just talk to someone, please. That's all I have to say for today. As always, I love you all, and I am here for you if I happen to be the one that you want to reach out to and talk to. I'm not a trained therapist. I'm not a replacement for a therapist. But I've been through it. And I can empathize and I can be compassionate and I can love you through it. So that's all. That's me again. Another episode of me banging on the microphone. And I'm so grateful for all of you who keep coming back and listening to more and more and more of this. And I look forward to the next few episodes. I love you guys. Bye.
Next week on my podcast, I have the amazing Travis Cochrane. At 18 years of age, Travis turned down a Broncos contract which set him on a path of destruction and an identity crisis, leading to depression, anxiety and other issues that nearly took his life. He struggled to find a career and battled alcohol abuse, relationship issues and more. At 26, he turned the corner. He is now one of the top 100 podcasters in Australia, a successful coach and a head coach for one of the fastest growing men's work brands in the world in Heart-Led Warriors. Travis's story is incredible. He is an inspiration to men all around the globe, and we will be going deep and hard into the subject of men's mental health and suicide prevention. So I hope that you can join me next week for this amazing podcast episode, and I look forward to speaking to you then. So thank you for listening to today's podcast. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. To get in touch with me regarding any of my episodes, you will find me on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok at Kath Telford Empowerment Coach. I love you. Bye.